We still have lots of information to discuss ahead of the NHL Trade Deadline. Who will be buyers? Who will be sellers? Today we're taking a look at teams like the Minnesota Wild, the San Jose Sharks, the Carolina Hurricanes. We have a couple quick updates on the Toronto Maple Leafs, plus the Rangers and Avalanche apparently have been watching each other very closely. Could there be a trade in the works? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now as we approach the NHL All-Star break, we have some more updated NHL trade rumors I want to discuss today. And let's kick things off with the Minnesota Wild. Now, we've had some speculation about what GM Bill Guerin might do here in recent weeks. Of course, there's been lots of talk on and off for quite a long time about forward Jason Zucker. We've had some more recent speculation about one of their top defensemen, and Matt Dumba, who certainly had an excellent year last year, but certainly has struggled this year. And there's been a few more players added to the mix here by some of the most recent articles from The Athletic, including a couple of veteran guys who may or may not be on the move, but certainly the potential is there for a trade. That includes forward Eric Staal and captain Mikko Koivu. Now, it's quite likely they say that Koivu probably would not waive his no-move clause. He's got a full no trade, and he's also on an expiring contract pending unrestricted free agent. He's 36 years old right now. He turns 37 in March, so he'd be 37 going into next season should he decide to want to continue playing and pursue another contract. Not quite clear what the Wild's intentions are, if they'd want to bring him back or open up his roster spot for some younger forwards, because clearly Bill Guerin has made it known that he really would like to acquire a top six forward, somebody who's on the younger side of things with some skill, and certainly some of these guys might help acquire that. But Koivu, I'm not really sure what his trade value would be. He's not having the most productive season. As I said, he's getting up there in age, but certainly his veteran presence could be a nice addition to some teams down the stretch. But most indications are that he likely would not want to waive. It would likely ride things out in Minnesota. Now, Eric Stahl's the other forward mentioned here. He does not have a full no move like Koivu does. He has a 10-team no trade list, so he does have some control, but many believe that Bill Guerin would likely talk to Stahl about any trade, even if the team was not on his list, and kind of get his consent and blessing before going ahead to take the deal. Apparently, Eric Stahl was not a fan of how things went when he was traded in season before. When he went from Carolina to the Rangers, things did not really work out, and apparently he wasn't a real fan of that. So out of him being a veteran, out of respect and everything he's brought to the franchise, there many believe Guerin would talk to him before making any additional moves. Now, the other player mentioned about the Minnesota Wild, not only defenseman Matt Dumba, but the possibility of defenseman Jonas Brodin potentially being a trade target as well. Now, because of their long-term contracts, more than likely guys like Ryan Suter and Jared Spurgeon would not be moved. I mean, they do have some control over that through their contract as well, with forms of no trade clauses, but still at the same time, they both have a lot of term left, and most teams are not going to want to take something like that on, at least not now, not ahead of the trade deadline. Whereas Dumba has 3 more years at $6 million, and Brodin only has 1 more after this one at 4.1. So he's certainly, both of them are attractive options. Both can be top 4 defensemen. Dumba could obviously try to regain his offensive game that he had previously, which I'm sure he will at some point. And Brodin can play in a variety of situations and be very useful as well. So I would fully suspect that Bill Guerin is going to be getting all kinds of phone calls. What exactly they bring back is really not exactly clear. They probably would likely try to get a combination of a top 6 forward along with some nice prospects and draft picks to load up for future use here, but I'm not really sure that too many teams are going to be partying with top 6 forwards this time of year, so more than likely they would probably be looking for future assets now, and then perhaps they'll address the top 6 forward need in the offseason. If they're going to be heading into selling mode, it doesn't make sense that they'd be able to make that type of acquisition, at least not right now. So we'll see what the Wild do, but they fully suspect to be getting lots of calls and likely be a busy team ahead of the deadline. Now let's jump over and take a look at a team who very well might be a good trade partner for the Wild, and that's the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the Hurricanes are in a situation, of course, where they lost one of their top D, and Dougie Hamilton, who's having an excellent season. Certainly would have been in the conversation for the Norris Trophy, at least I think he should be. But obviously he's going to be out for the remainder of the year with that broken leg, so that's not going to be good for them. It's a big blow to their back end. Even though they do have several other solid blue liners, many believe that Don Waddell will try to make an acquisition to try to replace Hamilton as best as he can. He's likely not going to get somebody to exactly replace him, but something as close as they can. And obviously, one of the guys with the Wild, like Dumba or Brodin, there's others out there too, very well might be players that they could target. Now, keep in mind, Carolina is in a really good position. They do have a bit of cap space. They can put Hamilton on long-term injury reserve to open up additional space to get access to. Plus, they have 2 first-round draft picks right now for the 2020 NHL draft, which is a very well-stacked and deep draft. And so other teams are going to be very interested in making acquisitions of first-round picks if they're able to do so. And clearly, like I said, they have their own first-round pick, plus that of the Maple Leafs. Now, there is a slim chance that the Maple Leafs pick might get deferred because it is top 10 protected. So it is possible they may not get it until the following season. But I wouldn't imagine that the Leafs are going to fall that low in the standings. Now, could the Leafs fall down and possibly end up in the lottery? I guess that is possible, but I wouldn't think that things would go that poorly. But unless something drastic like that happened, they do have that second first-round pick that'll be in the 2020 NHL draft. So they can certainly be a little bit more willing to gamble here with those draft picks. Plus, they have some very interesting young prospects as well that they could look to move. So many believe that Waddell is going to be shopping heavily for a defenseman, likely a right shot guy who can play similar type of minutes and obviously have a decent contract. Somebody who might even be able to fit in longer term as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be a rental player. Obviously, with Hamilton being out for the season, they could sort out any potential cap issues over the summer. Besides the D in Minnesota that we just mentioned as potential targets for the Carolina Hurricanes, they could be looking to some other teams like the Devils with Sami Vatanen. That's a possibility he could be traded. You have the LA Kings with Alec Martinez as well, who can play both sides of the ice. You got Ron Hainsey, who's certainly familiar with the organization, went to Ottawa Senators. I know he's not quite as dynamic, a little bit older, but could certainly provide that veteran presence, that depth that might be able to bolster their lineup here a little bit. He's certainly capable of still playing a fairly a big amount of minutes, which he has been for Ottawa, previously for Toronto as well. So I do think Hainsey is still very serviceable. Wouldn't completely rule out the possibility of the Ducks moving defenseman Josh Manson. It's somebody with a little bit more term, obviously, but I think he would be a potential player that the Ducks could try to move to gain some future assets as well. Like I said, if they can get a first round pick or some really solid prospects out of the Hurricanes, I can at least see them entertaining that offer. So there's plenty of defensemen around the league who fit the bill, with some are term, some are rentals, different combinations of situations there that the Hurricanes can target. But like I said, amongst all the other teams that are looking for D upgrades, I think they're better positioned than most and have good leverage to make a big time acquisition. Now, a few tidbits here on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, the defenseman Jake Muzzin appears to be close to returning from his foot injury. As we head into the All-Star break, he's heading to the American Hockey League to get in some action with the Toronto Marlies. And there is hope and optimism that if everything goes well and he doesn't suffer any setbacks, that their first game out of the All-Star break, which I believe is against the Predators, that he very well could play and be in the lineup. So he's going down to the Marlies on a conditioning stint to see if this rehab has gone well and if his foot is ready to roll here and get back into some NHL action. I would probably suspect if they weren't on the All-Star break right now that perhaps he might not be doing that, but either way, it's certainly a good exercise for players to go down and make sure that everything is feeling good before they get back into action here. Now, there's been a lot of talk lately, we've mentioned here numerous times, as the Leafs being one of those teams who are looking for D upgrades and what they might move to do it. Of course, they got a lot of good young forwards that we've talked about with like Kapanen, Janssen, even Alex Kerfoot's name has been brought up here recently as well. Obviously, they traded their first round pick to the Hurricanes to move that Patrick Marleau contract during the offseason. And now they find themselves in a similar situation as the Hurricanes, looking for similar type of players. And they don't have their first round pick. Carolina does. So that's certainly a big blow to the Leafs. But I understand they had to do that at the time. But it was a big price to pay to remove that Marleau contract from their overall cap situation. But if they wouldn't have done that, it's really difficult to say where things would be right now and how the roster might be shaped differently, because it certainly would box out a decent amount of players with that contract that Marleau was being paid. Guess the only real talk lately since the latest information came out about what the Leafs' plans might be would be that likely Kapanen is not going to be traded if it doesn't mean bringing back a really solid top four defense. I don't see them moving a young forward like him or Janssen if it's only going to bring back a potential backup goaltender or some depth pieces or anything else. It's going to have to be something that makes them significantly better and actually improves their roster, not just now, but for the foreseeable future, for at least the next few years down the road. So we'll see what Kyle Lewis has up his sleeve, but right now the Leafs find themselves 4 points out of a wild card spot heading into this All-Star break. They need to come out strong and get back on a winning streak, or they could find themselves possibly in danger of missing the playoffs, which everybody agrees would be a major disaster given the number of unrestricted free agents they have on this team. The Leafs are certainly built for that win-now mode, and in not accomplishing that and even getting into the playoffs would be a disaster and a big blow to the organization. Now, as we know, the San Jose Sharks have been having a very disappointing season and find themselves 11 points out of the playoffs as we enter the All-Star break. And of course, their likelihood of making a run here in the second half and getting into the playoffs are slim, but we can never say never after what we saw happen with the St. Louis Blues last year. But at the same time, the Blues run kind of started a little bit sooner than this, so there's certainly had a little bit more time on their side here. But the Sharks GM, Doug Wilson, got a bit of a vote of confidence from his owner and remains at the top of the food chain here when it comes to hockey operations. They did make some changes to their staff on the business operations side, and there was some concern, I guess maybe from some, that they very well could make changes on the other side of the hockey operations as well due to the disappointing season. Ultimately, his statements indicate that he has a lot of confidence in Doug Wilson's ability, and that the last time the Sharks faced adversity like this and missed the playoffs, they bounced back the following year, not only made the playoffs again, but made a deep playoff run, and he's fully confident that Wilson can orchestrate enough moves here with the team to help them accomplish something similar this time around. So obviously Wilson has likely discussed what his plans are, and it likely does involve selling off some assets. Those players likely include defenseman Brendan Dillon, possibly defenseman Tim Heed, likely forward Melker Karlsson, who can be a versatile penalty-killing forward as well. Those guys all likely do get traded to other teams, assuming that there is enough interest out there to make it happen. I can see at least one or two going for sure, and you can't help but wonder if veterans like Thornton and Marleau might get moved for that chance at a Stanley Cup. It's really difficult to say if they're going to continue to be brought back here by the organization on one-year deals in order to try to finally lift the Stanley Cup in Teal and San Jose. So it's, as much as they'd want to do that, they very well might have to go chasing their dream on another organization to finally get that Stanley Cup, because this does not look like it is the year for the San Jose Sharks. But I guess good news for Doug Wilson that he has the owner's confidence, and we'll see what moves he makes, and can they duplicate what happened a number of years back and see if they can bounce back and make a deep playoff run next season. Now, as I mentioned as well, the Colorado Avalanche and the New York Rangers apparently have been scouting each other quite thoroughly over the last number of weeks. They've had lots of staff appearing at each other's games, checking things out. There's a lot of belief that the Avalanche are certainly one of the suitors of forward Chris Kreider. And I think Kreider would be an excellent fit in Colorado if they were able to make that type of move ahead of the deadline. They're a very offensive team, and he would only make them that much better. Now, what would the price tag be going the other way? Many believe that it very well could cost a first-round pick and a prospect to land Kreider. At least that's going to be the Rangers' opening ask, at least to get things started off here. As we've seen in the past, they've been able to obtain first-round picks for other players, like last year with Kevin Hayes. And I do think it's fair to say that Kreider's value is probably going to be a little bit better than Hayes, although Hayes was a center iceman, so it is some debate there if he'll actually get a better return, or at the very least a comparable, similar return. So could they get more than a first-round pick for Kreider? It is a possibility, but according to Colorado Avalanche writer Adrian Dater, he says that the Avalanche likely would not want to give up a first-round pick and a prospect to be one or the other. It's believed the main prospect that the Rangers would be interested in would be Czech forward Martin Kaut, who was a 2018 first-round selection, but to give up that and a first-round pick might seem like a steep price tag for Colorado, who has lots of cap space, lots of assets, and are very well positioned, like the Hurricanes, like I mentioned, to make these types of moves ahead of the deadline. They're two of the teams that I do think, like I said, they're going to be ones to watch because they're in the best position overall between their cap space, assets, draft picks, etc., in order to make some big acquisitions here ahead of the NHL Trade Deadline. Those teams have been watching each other quite closely because could they come to a deal? It's certainly quite a possibility. There's been some talk, at least I know from Avalanche fans, that they haven't been thrilled with their goaltending situation, so you never know. Maybe they're looking at Alexander Georgiev as well, because it is rumored that he could be moved for the right price tag, as well as the Rangers likely pursue going ahead here with Henrik Lundqvist and Igor Shesterkin next season and beyond here for as long as Lundqvist wants to play, and Shesterkin will be the starter in the very near future. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything discussed here today. What types of moves do you think we'll see from these teams? It could be a very, very busy NHL trade deadline. All kinds of chatter around all kinds of teams around the NHL. Who will be buyers? Who will be sellers? What moves will we see? Give me your mock trades and what you think is going to happen down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications, and checking out our membership section as well. We get some great perks available if you're not already checked it out. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time.